are you concerned from your perspective about the concept of the Israelis trying to do this on their own? I mean, do they have? I know obviously they've got a very advanced air force, but do they have, as an example, the munitions needed, which are not, shall we say, out in the open?
Well, I think if you're going off of 2024, which was a historic year for the Israel-Iran rivalry, both in terms of what the regime launched, as well as how and where and using what ordinances the Israelis responded, I think, A, that thing I said before about the Israelis being able to confound expectations and having certain assets in reserve holds true. But if I had to do kind of the open source macro assessment, I think today in 2025, the Israelis can destroy any above ground facility in the Islamic Republic of Iran today on their own. An above ground facility could be a political entity, it could be a military base, it could be a production facility for drones or missiles, it could be a radar installation, it could even be an above ground reactor or nuclear storage facility. What they cannot destroy is two or three facilities. One of the facilities being underground at Natanz, one of the other facilities being much, much more deeper underground at Fordo, and a third facility being constructed on the outskirts of Natanz at Kuhe Kolang or Pickaxe Mountain, which the Iranians say will be a centrifuge production site in the future, but heaven forbid it becomes an enrichment site in the future. Those are things that without, I think, the heavy bombers that countries like the United States of America has, without some of the munitions that you can drop, those GBUs, I forget which number, I don't know if it's 38 or 57, the massive ordnance penetrator, as well as some of the other heavier conventional bombs like the US has dropped in Afghanistan. I'm thinking the Moab of 2017. Without those that can really explode and tunnel and penetrate much, much deeper than the 500-pound or 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs that you've seen the Israelis use to the north and south against Hezbollah and against Hamas, you will need America, which is why this debate about Israel's right to respond is not a debate that exists in isolation. It's a debate that exists very much at the heart of U.S.
Absolutely.
national security policy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and let's pick up on that. What do you believe is the likelihood that the Trump administration would get on board? I suppose it would in part depend on the credibility of the intelligence that the Israelis present. But where do you think that stands?
I think this is a very kaleidoscopic scenario. It depends on the intelligence, it depends on the sourcing, it depends on the nature of the talks, depends on, I would even say, with respect, the view of the president towards the Iranian threat that day or at that point in time, and whether he feels like he has the backing of not just his party and not just the Congress, but the vast majority of the American people. Will the president have been able to show the American people that there was more than a good faith effort to reach some kind of diplomatic resolution to the Iranian nuclear crisis? I'm sure the president and his team in Washington are going through, even right now, in the absence of the strike being dangled, all of those things with round 5 of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks underway or wrapping up in Rome right now. So those are all factors that can impact and create push or pull factors. But ultimately, I would say, would the regime be shooting itself in the foot? Because one fear that I have is they get a lot more by staying at the table. And if the only way the U.S. goes militarily at the Iranians is if the Iranians are no longer at the table, well, then the Iranians can come to the table and just read a whole host of grievances and filibuster and just kind of gain from the optics of being there without really providing any concessions. That would make it a lot harder for, I think, the Trump administration to back an Israeli strike. And it also depends a lot on phasing. Would the Americans want Israel to go first, then America to play defense, and then take out what is left? Or would the Israelis want a joint strike? Or would the Israelis want a retaliatory strike only in the instance of Iranians directly responding to Israel? Or what if the Iranians widen the fronts and go after U.S. assets or the jurisdictions from certain sites from where certain things were launched? Again, this is very much like a kaleidoscope. We know the facts, we know the positions of people, but based on the context, when you turn it, that image turns drastically differently. And there is as much politics in this question as there is policy in this question.
What do you think is the likelihood or the possibility that the Trump administration is maybe playing chess here? And what I mean by that is that they don't really believe that the Iranian regime is going to, make a good faith effort in these talks, that they wouldn't follow through and actually stick to any agreements, but that they're having these conversations. I mean, the Trump administration having these conversations basically to show, as you mentioned, the American public that they've made all good faith effort to go the diplomatic route. And that gives them top cover then to, switch to the military option.
I would say it exists, but it exists in the universe of it being a non-zero number, meaning I probably put the chances of that in the single digits or very, very low double digits. I think the president means what he says, and he's been pretty clear, at least on this front, of he does not want the Islamic Republic to get a nuclear weapon. But even when he was campaigning before term one, his whole thing was about making deals, even in places where potentially that might not be possible or hard or feasible, or where it may come with political constraints. His line was back then, and it remains true today: I buy bad deals, I make them good deals. You saw that with North Korea, but with North Korea, he learned, when there was really no chance, he was willing to walk away. Now, that didn't commence a larger war and didn't lead to a larger strike. But I think with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran, the president has said that he doesn't want to have to do the military option, but he's willing to at least put it on the table and make it meaningful over time. So I think every threat with respect to this president, every option with respect to this president is credible. And if at 5 months out I had to judge the Trump administration's Iran policy, I would say they're trying to go a mile wide and an inch deep on everything. So even though you heard this line back starting from President George W. Bush when he said all options are on the table, when you look at literally everything that President Trump has been doing, he has literally been putting stock behind every single option: military, economic with the sanctions, for example, political, diplomatic even, by engaging in these direct or indirect, depending on who you believe, bilateral conversations with the Iranians. So he is every element: diplomatic, informational, military, economic, trying to create an element of his Iran policy. And I think he's trying to provoke a reaction. He's trying to see where the Iranians are responding. And right now, the Iranians are responding primarily in the diplomatic or political domain. They're trying to test him. They're trying to buy time. But now it behooves him to grow the stock of beyond just an inch deep of those economic and of those military options. And if I had to advise him right now, I would say one thing that you got to trim with respect is the positive rhetoric or the optimism that the most powerful person in the world injects into these talks, which is when the president says, I want them to go well, I think they're going well, looks like they're going well. The Iranian currency, the rial, has appreciated, meaning improved about 20% since talks started, just because of this slightly more different, changing, positive atmosphere. The president has gone after 3 refineries in China, going after Iranian oil while talking to the Iranians. This is stuff President Obama and President Biden never did. And yet still, Iranian exports are flatlined at 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 million barrels a day, depending on who you ask. So there is going to have to be more done to make the Iranians feel the pain. But long story short, I don't just see this as the president ticking a box and rushing through things. I think this is consistent with how he sees the Iranian threat, consistent with his options, consistent with what he campaigned on multiple times before the American public. And he is trying to square peg, round hole this, because the Islamic Republic is trying to raise the cost and the U.S. is trying to limit the cost. And nary the two shall meet.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.